This is the coldest city on earth. Every year they experience brutal winters, often with temperatures below -50 Celsius. Everything here is floating on a 100-foot deep thick layer of ice that never melts. People freezing to death outside is not a rare incident here. Even a few minutes outside can cause severe frostbites, which can result in losing your fingers and toes. This is Yakutsk, Siberia. It was once used by the Soviet Union to exile prisoners and now has been converted into a city with over 350,000 permanent residents. The coldest temperature ever recorded in this city is -64 Celsius, and -35 Celsius is considered a warm day here.
Today very warm.
Even in these harsh winters when temperatures drop below -50 Celsius, there are homeless people in Yakutsk. I've been closely studying these people for years, and this is how they survive the most brutal winter season on earth. There's one month in the calendar of Yakutsk people that they absolutely hate, because it is the coldest month in Yakutsk. Although Antarctica is the coldest place on earth, Yakutsk gets even colder than Antarctica this month. Sadly, it's January, the first month of the year. If you are living in Yakutsk, you can't live here like in other normal cities, because there's a list of things you should avoid during this season. Ironically, the things we used to do the most are the things we should avoid here. The first thing on the list is to avoid stepping outside as much as possible. Even though you see these people outside, they only step outside if it is absolutely necessary. Otherwise, they stay indoors most of the time. However, if you want to go outside, it's a bit of a process here. The outside temperature is below -40 Celsius, so you have to wear at least 5 layers of clothes. Then you come to the entrance of your building. There's something unusual about these buildings in Yakutsk. They all have 3 doors at the entrance. While this helps to prevent cold air from getting inside the building, as we keep exploring you will realize that this is only one of many absurd things you can see in this city. Once you step outside, it only takes milliseconds for you to understand why these people hate this month so much. The freezing air hits your lungs like a shock, making it hard to breathe. If you wear a metal spectacle, it sticks to your cheek like this piece of meat sticks to this metal pipe, and when you decide to remove it, it will tear off chunks of flesh on your face. If you are walking from one point to another and your destination is only 20 minutes away, it will take you almost 1 hour to reach your destination. Because if you stay outside for more than 5 minutes, first you will feel a stinging pain in exposed parts of your body. Then you will go numb, which means the blood supply has stopped and you can no longer feel anything. This is called frostbites, and if this happens, you should immediately get inside a nearby cafe or restaurant and warm yourself up. If not, it can even result in death. But frostbites are not the only reason why it takes too long to travel from one point to another here. When the temperatures drop below -30 Celsius, Yakutsk gets shrouded in this thick layer of ice fog. When this happens, you can't see things more than 5 meters away. It obscures landmarks and one can easily get lost in this fog. According to the University of Yakutsk, this ice fog is created when smoke from houses and vehicles accumulates and freezes in the low atmosphere. They advise residents to stay indoors when the city is engulfed in this ice fog, as it is unsafe to breathe in such conditions. The next thing you should avoid in Yakutsk is buying a vehicle. Having a vehicle for yourself is a good idea, but not in Yakutsk. Apparently it is the worst mistake you can make here. Because if you have a vehicle, you have to leave its engine running until the winter is over. If you turn it off, the engine oil and gasoline inside the vehicle freeze within 20 minutes, and you will have to wait 4 to 6 months to turn it back on. As you can see, there's no one inside this car, but its engine is running. However, if you want to turn your vehicle's engine off, there are 2 things you can do. The first option is renting a heated garage like this, but heated garages in Yakutsk are expensive, so only a few can afford them. So Natasha is the other option you have. Now maybe you also have friends and cousins with the name Natasha, but here Natasha is what they call these cars. In fact, Natasha is cheaper than renting a heated garage. It will automatically turn on your vehicle from time to time to keep it warm. However, Natasha is hard to maintain. So many people in Yakutsk leave their vehicles running until the winter is over, or some people also decide to abandon their vehicles like this. Even if you can manage all these excessive expenses, you still have to think twice before you buy a vehicle in Yakutsk. Because you may not realize this, but driving a vehicle in Yakutsk is extremely dangerous. This thick layer of ice fog that always restricts visibility is a constant hazard. But the real danger is, if your car breaks down while you're on the road, you have only 30 minutes to fix it. In this extreme temperature, you can't even use your mobile phone to contact someone. Because if you're outside of the urban area, often you don't have cell phone signals. Even if you do have cell phone signals, your battery lasts only a few minutes. Sometimes they even malfunction. Thankfully, vehicles in Yakutsk have some distinctive features that help you in this extreme cold. For example, instead of just a single layer of glass, these vehicles have 2 layers of glass for better insulation against freezing air. If you look carefully, you can also notice that the front grille of this vehicle is covered to reduce the air intake. This helps to keep the engine warm. However, none of these features help you if you can't fix your vehicle within 30 minutes. You will freeze to death on the side of a road. Thankfully, Yakutsk has a reliable public transportation system. And of course, it is the most used transportation method here. Even people who own private vehicles use public transportation to go to work because it is not only less expensive but also safer than driving their vehicles. But here, everything comes with a price. Even going to the bus stop and waiting for the bus to arrive is a painful experience. Not only adults but also these kids have to suffer in this extreme coldness every day while waiting for their bus to arrive to go to school. Even if it is minus 50 Celsius outside, these kids have no excuse but to go to school. If you ask, is that a comfortable temperature for kids to go to school? The answer is no. This is a temperature that can freeze your eyelashes in seconds. But they have to remember that they are living in the coldest city on earth. If they close the schools at minus 50 Celsius, probably they will have to keep the schools closed most of the year. However, if it is minus 55 Celsius outside, only then do they consider it dangerous for kids to go outside. In such conditions, schools in Yakutsk remain closed. If you take a walk through the city, you will notice that here roads are slippery and need constant maintenance. People clean these pavements every hour because they get covered by frozen ice. Look at this staircase, it is covered with carpets. And it is not just this staircase, but also almost every staircase in this city which leads to an entrance of a building is covered with carpets, because it is slippery. One thing that stands out in Yakutsk is that these buildings don't have foundation. They are all built on stilts. However, the reason behind using this technique is a fascinating story. As you know, Yakutsk sits on permafrost. It's a 100-foot deep mixed layer of soil, rock, sand and ice that stays frozen year-round. So when they build these structures, one obstacle they have to overcome is to stop the heat of the building emanate to the permafrost layer beneath it. Because if the permafrost layer melts, the building will be unstable and can even fall down to the ground. Look at this old building. It was built without stilts and now it is slowly crumbling. If you go inside one of these apartment buildings, you will also notice that these buildings have unusually thick walls, about 2 feet thick. This not only makes these buildings incredibly strong, but also they are well insulated against the cold weather. However, when using stilts, there's a certain weight limit that these stilts can hold. That's why you don't see buildings with more than 16 stories in Yakutsk. The same rule applies to these pipes. These pipes you are looking at right now are carrying hot water to heat buildings, and you can see these pipes everywhere in Yakutsk. If you're wondering why these pipes are not buried underground, the reason is permafrost. If they bury these pipes underground, the hot water will instantly freeze and the system won't function. However, there are two heating systems in Yakutsk, and this is called central heating. But this heating system is less efficient and has some problems. As you can see, these pipes are well insulated to retain heat, but in this extreme cold, the heat escapes even before the water reaches the buildings. So buildings with central heating often get either too hot or too cold water, depending on how far the building is from the boiling center. Sometimes the insulation gets damaged, making the system even less efficient. It is also not hard to find water leaks in these pipes. But central heating is often used by all buildings, and people who live in apartment buildings constructed after 2010 have individual gas heaters like this. This new heating system is more efficient and about 90% cheaper compared to central heating. Because of the amenities like this, here it is everyone's dream to live in an apartment building. But the problem is, these people who live in all buildings can't afford an apartment. Even though their rent is cheap, they have to keep spending more on central heating despite their financial struggles. But whether you are living in a modern apartment or old building, there's one place in Yakutsk that everyone in this city visits at least once a week, and it is this farmers market. But this is not just any market, this is the coldest open-air market in the world. And it is also a place where people work in extreme cold, often below -50°C during winter. Once you take a walk through this market, you will realize that Yakutsk has a completely different food culture. It may be not unusual for you to go to your local supermarket and buy some fish, pork or beef like this, but in this market you can also find things that you have never even thought people in any part of the world would eat. Look here, not only do they sell frozen rabbits, reindeer meat and bags of frozen milk, but also they sell this horse meat in this public market. It might sound unbelievable, but horse meat is one of the most popular dishes in Yakutsk. You can even see horse meat featured in hotel menus. But what's not surprising is that in this market these vendors don't use freezers. Because when you are stepping outside of your building in Yakutsk, you are literally stepping into a giant freezer that is much larger and much colder than the one in your house. So there's no point in using a freezer when you're already living inside a freezer. So here they don't use freezers. They just keep everything on open shelves and everything stays solid frozen. Look, these fish are hard as rocks, and if you hit someone with this frozen fish, it can even cause serious injury. However, if you pay attention to the name of this market, it is called the farmers market, but you don't find any vegetables in this market. The reason why you don't find vegetables in this market is, in these harsh conditions, these people can grow vegetables. So people in Yakutsk mainly rely on fish, meat and dairy products, and that hasn't changed for thousands of years. But modernism has come to Yakutsk and things have started to change. Even though their ancestors didn't have the luxury of eating vegetables, now these people can go to a local supermarket and buy vegetables if they want. But still, only rarely does someone buy vegetables here. Because these vegetables are imported from warmer regions from thousands of kilometers away. So the prices are about 2 times higher than in central Russia. For example, if you buy 500 grams of tomatoes, it costs you about $10. So if you think about an average person in Yakutsk whose monthly salary is about $800, that person can afford to mainly rely on vegetables. Even though it is hard to believe, here it is more affordable to rely on fish and meat than buying vegetables. But not chicken though, even chicken is imported to Yakutsk. So the farmers market in Yakutsk has become the lifeline for people who live in this city. If you are living in Yakutsk, you need a lot of energy to endure this extreme cold season. So this small population in Yakutsk generally eat foods with lots of fat and proteins because it gives them more energy to survive this long and harsh winter season. Eating 2 times in the morning is also completely normal here. However, since they can't grow vegetables, they have limited resources to get their food. So here, food is precious. and generation after generation, these people have learned to get the best use of their food. For example, if they slaughter a horse, they don't let anything be wasted. Starting from the tail, they consume all the parts of the horse, including its brain. If you ask someone in Yakutsk who has eaten a horse brain about how it tastes, they would say it tastes like eggs. These horses are a big part of the Yakutsk culture. They have adapted to these harsh winter conditions for over 30,000 years. As you can see, they are much shorter and much thinner than normal horses we see in other places. This means they have a body with less surface area compared to other horses. This unique characteristic of their body helps them to stay warm for a long period. Unfortunately, some animals like cats can't survive in Yakutsk. However, being a horse in Yakutsk doesn't seem like much fun. They rear you in miserable temperatures until you're old enough to slaughter and prepare a delicious meal. Many horses are slaughtered even before they reach the age of 6 months. This blood sausage is one of the most popular dishes in Yakutsk. It is made with horse blood and intestines. They mix horse blood with fat, flour and grains and then stuff it into the intestines. For the dessert, they get a piece of frozen horse meat bought from the farmer's market and then slice it with a traditional Yakutian knife. It is also very important to slice this horse meat while it stays frozen, otherwise it doesn't taste right. This traditional Yakutian knife is sharp and perfect for this job. Here, everyone has one of these knives in their house. After slicing the horse meat, they eat it raw and frozen. This is a horse liver, and it is considered the main delicacy in Yakutsk. Just like before, they slice it with this knife and eat it raw and frozen. For some reason, they call it Yakutian chocolate. Maybe it is because it actually looks like chocolate. As you can imagine, if you eat this much meat, you definitely need to have a freezer in your house. But here, nobody has freezers in their houses. Just like you saw in the farmer's market, everyone in Yakutsk uses a separate room in their house as the freezer room to store their food. People who don't have a space in their houses simply hand their food out of the windows of the building. Back in the farmer's market, these vendors struggle to keep themselves warm. The temperatures often drop below -50 Celsius during this season. But no matter how cold it is outside, this market is open year-round. If you come here to buy something, you probably only spend about 5 minutes. But these vendors work here from early morning to the evening without taking any breaks. If you ask them how they survive these extreme temperatures, they would simply say just wear more clothes. But you can see their pain by just looking at their face. Many of them suffer from frostbites on their cheeks and toes, and others try to keep themselves warm by shaking their legs and hands. Yet nobody complains. Some of these vendors have been working here for more than 20 years. Even though they remember working on days with temperatures below -60 Celsius, nobody remembers a single day when this market remained closed due to the extreme cold. It is truly remarkable how they have adapted to this unbearable cold that most of us wouldn't even last a few minutes.